Expert John Gagliano, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I want to talk about, I've been listening to the air traffic control audio that's been released so far this morning, and that Black Hawk, in my opinion, has given pretty clear instructions to pass behind the airplane. We don't know, though, if the pilot heard that request. I just said there have been issues with Black Hawk helicopters in the past. What are you making after listening to some of this audio?
I don't think it was an issue with the helicopter. I think it was the air traffic controller gave an instruction to the Black Hawk pilot to see the American flight, and he acknowledged that he saw it. And then he was told to pass behind it. What I think is that, especially at this early stage, is that the Black Hawk pilot never saw the American flight or had it confused with other lights in the background. The skyline of DC is lit up real bright at night. Just like the skyline of Los Angeles, and there are confusing lights for a pilot, especially a helicopter pilot that's pretty low.
Talk about the challenges of just flying in and around that airport, that airspace. It is one of the busiest in the world, and there are military training facilities right next to it. What is it like there, and do you think that something will change after this?
Most pilots don't know what it's like to fly in there because it's a restricted zone. It's over the nation's capital. There are military bases all over the place, and they're not training bases, they're real live bases. If a civilian pilot was to go into that zone, they would be intercepted by helicopters, by F-16s, by other military aircraft. So most pilots don't know what it's like to fly in there. You need special permission as a pilot to fly into and out of Reagan Airport. And so it's a very safe area because there are actually, even though it's a busy airport, there are no civilian pilots in Cessnas or other aircraft flying around that zone.
That's interesting. We also saw this morning that Virginia Senator Mark Warner is making a statement raising concerns over the airspace congestion there. So you're saying there's no civilian flights, but there are. I was reading Congress has actually petitioned to have a lot more direct flights for themselves to get back home to their constituents. What are your thoughts on having these military training facilities next to one of the busiest runways, as it's called, in the world?
Well, you have to have military bases around D.C. to protect the nation's capital and the nation's infrastructure that's there. As I mentioned, we don't want any bad actors in planes flying in there. So those facilities are necessary to protect the nation's capital. And those military flights are not just training flights, they are actual operational flights that operate out of there. I think it's necessary. Obviously, there's going to have to be some a really significant inquiry into what happened here and rule changes to ensure that this confusion and this tragedy never happens again.
Yeah, and you think about the victims and the families of all of those victims, how many people are impacted. And according to the reporting we've seen so far, it appears the helicopter flew into the path of the jet, right? So military aircraft also have immunity from any kind of litigation, liability. What do you think the recourse is going to be for these families?
Well, I don't know that there's a blanket immunity. There's something called the Federal Tort Claims Act, where people are allowed to sue the federal government. So if an attorney who knows aviation and knows the Federal Tort Claims Act follows the requirements of that law, then there is a potential that there could be a suit against the American government. There are some restrictions on how that suit goes through procedurally and what court it can be brought in. But I don't think there's blanket immunity in this case. There is potentially lawsuits available to the victims, unfortunately.
It's going to take a while to sort all of these impacts out. John, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me on this tragic occasion.
Yes.